In the heart of a war-torn nation, the city of Solace lay in ruins, its skyline shattered, and its streets littered with the remnants of a once thriving civilization. Smoke rose from the crumbling buildings, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and burning debris. The Loyalist forces, determined to reclaim the city from the rebels, had launched a full-scale assault. Amidst this chaos, Captain Sarah Lawson's unit was deep behind enemy lines, cut off from reinforcements and stranded in hostile territory. Captain Sarah Lawson, a seasoned and resilient leader, surveyed the devastation around her. She was no stranger to the horrors of war, having seen more than her fair share of bloodshed and loss. But this mission felt different. The odds were stacked against them, and she could feel the weight of responsibility bearing down on her shoulders. Beside her stood Sergeant David D. Myers, her second-in-command. Myers was a tactical genius, known for his quick thinking and ability to improvise under pressure. He was the kind of soldier who could turn the tide of battle with a single well-timed maneuver. But even Myers seemed troubled by their current predicament. Corporal Sam Brick Mason, the team's heavy hitter, was a man of few words. A former construction worker before the war, he had traded his hammer for a rifle but still possessed the same unwavering loyalty and strength. He stood like a sentinel, ready to protect his comrades at all costs. Private Jamie Doc Harrison, the group's medic, was the youngest and most inexperienced member of the team. Fresh-faced and full of hope, he had joined the army to make a difference, to save lives amidst the carnage. But the reality of war had quickly shattered his idealism. And finally, there was Private Elena Ace Navarro, the team's sniper. Cool under pressure and deadly accurate, Navarro had a reputation for being able to hit a target from impossible distances. But beneath her calm exterior, she was running from a past that haunted her every waking moment. The unit's mission had been straightforward: push the rebels out of Solace and secure key positions within the city. But as the assault began, they quickly found themselves overwhelmed. The Loyalist forces were decimated by a well-coordinated rebel counterattack, and communications were severed. Now Lawson's unit was on its own, surrounded by enemy forces with no way to call for help. The first sign of trouble came when the unit was ambushed by a rebel patrol as they made their way through a narrow alley. Bullets ricocheted off the walls, and the air was filled with the deafening roar of gunfire. Lawson and her team instinctively took cover, returning fire with precision and determination. "Keep your heads down," Lawson shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to get out of this alley." Myers, always quick on his feet, scanned the area for an escape route. He spotted a partially collapsed building to their left, its entrance blocked by rubble. "We can make it through there." "Brick, clear the way." Mason nodded and, with a powerful burst of strength, began to shove the debris aside. Meanwhile, Navarro took up a position behind a broken wall, her rifle trained on the advancing rebels. One by one she picked off their attackers, each shot a precise and lethal strike. "Move, move, move," Lawson ordered as soon as the path was clear. The team sprinted towards the building, diving through the narrow gap just as the rebels closed in. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the floor was littered with shattered glass and broken furniture. But it provided the cover they desperately needed. "Everyone accounted for?" Lawson asked, breathing heavily. "All here, Cap," Myers confirmed, though his eyes were full of concern. "But we can't stay here long. They're going to flank us." Lawson knew he was right. The rebels would regroup and come after them with even greater force. They had to keep moving, keep one step ahead of their pursuers. But they were in unfamiliar territory, cut off from their own forces and with no clear path to safety. As they caught their breath, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They were stranded deep in enemy territory, with dwindling supplies and no reinforcements in sight. The odds were against them and they all knew it. But Captain Lawson wasn't about to give up. "We find cover, regroup and plan our next move," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "We're not done yet." The city of Solace, once a thriving metropolis, had become a maze of destruction. The streets were choked with rubble, and the buildings that still stood were little more than hollowed-out shells. The constant threat of ambushes and snipers forced the team to move cautiously, sticking to the shadows and avoiding open areas. With no other options, the unit split into two teams to scavenge for supplies. Lawson led one team, while Myers took the other. They needed food, water, ammunition, anything that would help them survive the ordeal ahead. As Lawson's team made their way through the ruins, they came across a group of civilians huddled in a makeshift shelter. The civilians were desperate, their eyes hollow with fear and hunger. They eyed the soldiers warily, unsure if they were friend or foe. "Please," one of the civilians, an elderly woman, begged. "We haven't eaten in days. Can you spare anything?" Lawson hesitated. She knew they had barely enough supplies for themselves, but she couldn't ignore the plight of these people. "We'll do what we can," she said, handing over some of their rations. It wasn't much, but it was all she could spare. As they continued their search, the team's conversation turned to their pasts, revealing more about who they were before the war. "Myers, you've got a family waiting for you back home, right?" Mason asked as they scoured an abandoned grocery store for supplies. "Yeah," Myers replied, a sad smile tugging at his lips. "A wife and a daughter. They're the reason I keep going. I just want to get back to them in one piece." "What about you, Brick?" Harrison chimed in. "What did you do before all this?" Mason shrugged. "Construction. Building things instead of tearing them down. I never thought I'd end up here, fighting a war in a place I can barely pronounce." "And you, Doc?" Lawson asked, curious about the young medic's story. Harrison hesitated before answering. "I joined up because I wanted to help people. Thought I could make a difference, save lives. But this isn't what I expected." Navarro, who had been silent up until now, spoke up. "None of us expected this, Doc, but we're here, and we do what we have to do." Lawson nodded in agreement. "We're all in this together. We survive together or not at all." As the team returned to their makeshift base, they were ambushed by a rebel patrol. The firefight was intense, with bullets flying in every direction. Navarro quickly took out the enemy sniper, while Mason laid down suppressive fire. Lawson and Harrison provided cover as Myers led the charge to escape. They managed to break free, but the encounter left them shaken and with even fewer supplies than before. The harsh reality of their situation was becoming all too clear. They were running out of time. Back at their temporary refuge, an abandoned office building, Lawson gathered her team to discuss their next move. The situation was dire and they all knew it. But giving up wasn't an option. "We're too far behind enemy lines to wait for rescue," Lawson began. "Our only chance is to make it to the Loyalist outpost on the other side of the city. But it's not going to be easy. The rebels have fortified the area, and they'll be expecting us." "What's the plan, Cap?" Myers asked, ever the strategist. "We'll have to move at night under the cover of darkness," Lawson replied. "Navarro, you'll need to scout ahead and take out any sentries. The rest of us will follow close behind, avoiding main roads and sticking to the back alleys." As they discussed the plan, the team members began to bond even more deeply. They shared stories around a small fire, recounting memories of their lives before the war. "Myers, tell us about your daughter," Mason said, trying to lift the mood. Myers smiled, his face lighting up for the first time in days. "Her name's Lily. She's 5 years old, loves to draw. She's got this old sketchbook she carries everywhere. Keeps saying she's going to be an artist when she grows up." "Sounds like a smart kid," Navarro remarked, her voice softening. "She is," Myers agreed. "That's why I need to get back to her. I promised her I'd come home." "What about you, Ace?" Lawson asked, turning to Navarro. "You never talk about your past." Navarro hesitated, her eyes darkening. "There's not much to tell. I grew up in a rough neighborhood, learned how to take care of myself early on. Joined the army to get away from it all." "Seems like you traded one battlefield for another," Harrison observed. "Yeah, but at least here I can make a difference," Navarro replied, her tone resolute. Lawson looked around at her team, seeing the weariness in their eyes but also the determination. They were all exhausted, both physically and mentally, but they still had fight left in them. "Let's get some rest," Lawson said finally. "We move out at first light." The following night, the team moved cautiously through the darkened streets of Solace. The city was eerily quiet, with only the distant sounds of gunfire and explosions breaking the silence. They stuck to the shadows, avoiding the main roads and keeping a close watch for any signs of enemy activity. As dawn began to break, they reached the edge of the fortified rebel territory. Navarro took point, her sniper rifle at the ready. She scanned the area, searching for any enemy sentries that might be lying in wait. Sniper 12 o'clock, Navarro whispered, her voice barely audible. I'll take him out. The team held their breath as Navarro lined up her shot. The seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity before the sharp crack of her rifle echoed through the streets. The rebel sniper dropped silently from his perch, his lifeless body slumping to the ground. Nice shot, Myers murmured, his admiration clear. Let's move, Lawson ordered, leading the team forward. But their luck didn't hold. As they crossed an open courtyard, a burst of gunfire erupted from a nearby building. The rebels had spotted them, and now they were pinned down with no cover in sight. Take cover, Lawson shouted, diving behind a crumbling wall. Mason returned fire, his powerful rifle sending rebel soldiers scrambling for cover. Harrison tended to Navarro, who had been grazed by a bullet during the exchange. The wound was superficial, but it was a reminder of how precarious their situation was. We need to get out of here, Myers shouted over the gunfire. We're sitting ducks. Lawson knew he was right. They were vastly outnumbered, and the rebels were closing in. But retreating wasn't an option, they had to push forward, or they wouldn't make it out alive. Brick, take point. We'll cover you, Lawson ordered. Mason nodded and charged forward, using his bulk to draw the enemy's fire. The rest of the team followed close behind, picking off the rebels one by one as they advanced. Finally, they reached the cover of another building, barricading themselves inside. They were safe for the moment, but the tension was palpable. They had barely escaped with their lives, and the realization of how close they had come to death weighed heavily on all of them. As they caught their breath, a crackling sound came from Myers' radio. He quickly adjusted the frequency and a faint voice came through. All Loyalist forces, this is command. Reinforcements are en route to Solace. Day 48 hours. Hold your positions until then. Relief washed over the team, but it was tempered by the knowledge that they had to survive another 48 hours in this hellish city. We just need to hold out a little longer, Lawson said, trying to keep her voice steady. We're almost there. The team's brief respite was shattered when a man appeared at the entrance of the building. He was unarmed, dressed in tattered civilian clothes, and his hands were raised in surrender. Don't shoot. I'm not one of them, the man pleaded. I can help you. Lawson eyed him suspiciously. Who are you? My name's Alexei. I was with the rebels, but I defected. I know a way out of the city, a safe route through the old subway tunnels. The rebels don't know about it. The team exchanged wary glances. Trusting a rebel defector was a risky move, but they were running out of options. The prospect of a safe route was too tempting to ignore. We're low on supplies and we can't hold out for long, Myers pointed out. This might be our best shot. Lawson weighed the decision carefully. If Alexei was telling the truth, they could escape the city without further bloodshed. But if he was leading them into a trap, it could be their end. All right, Lawson said finally. We'll follow you. But if this is a trick, you'll be the first to go. Alexei nodded, fear evident in his eyes. I swear, I'm telling the truth. The team followed Alexei through the shattered streets, staying on high alert. As they approached the entrance to the subway tunnels, a sense of unease settled over them. The tunnel was dark, with only a faint light at the far end. Down here, Alexei whispered, gesturing for them to follow. The team descended into the tunnel, their footsteps echoing off the walls. It was damp and musty, with the occasional rat scurrying past. The tension was palpable, and every sound made them jump. Halfway through the tunnel, Alexei suddenly bolted, sprinting toward the exit. Navarro reacted instantly, raising her rifle to take him down, but it was too late. Ambush! Lawson shouted as rebel soldiers poured into the tunnel from hidden alcoves. The team was surrounded with no cover and no way out. A fierce firefight erupted, the confined space amplifying the sound of gunfire. Mason, always at the front, took several hits but kept fighting, using his brute strength to hold off the attackers. We need to move. Now! Myers shouted, dragging the wounded Harrison toward the exit. Lawson and Navarro provided cover fire as they fought their way through the rebels. The team was split up in the chaos, with Lawson and Myers managing to escape through the tunnel's exit, while Navarro and Harrison were cut off. Outside the tunnel, Lawson and Myers collapsed against a wall, panting and covered in dirt and blood. They had narrowly escaped, but their situation was dire. Myers was injured, and they had lost valuable supplies in the ambush. "We need to go back for them," Lawson said, her voice shaking with anger and guilt. "We can't," Myers replied, his voice strained. "We're too exposed. We need to find shelter and regroup." Lawson knew he was right, but the thought of leaving her team behind tore at her. She had trusted Alexei, and it had nearly cost them everything. Now, her faith in her own judgment was shaken, and the weight of command felt heavier than ever. With Myers severely injured, Lawson knew they had to find shelter fast. They limped through the deserted streets, finally finding refuge in a partially destroyed hospital. The building was eerily silent, the halls lined with empty gurneys and broken medical equipment. Lawson helped Myers to a bed and began treating his wounds as best she could. But without proper medical supplies, there was only so much she could do. Myers was in bad shape and they both knew it. "How bad is it?" Myers asked, his voice weak. Lawson hesitated before answering. "You'll make it. Just hang in there." But the truth was she wasn't sure how much longer he could hold on. Myers had lost a lot of blood, and infection was a real risk in these conditions. As Lawson tended to Myers, the hospital's eerie silence brought back memories of past battles, of comrades she had lost along the way. The weight of those losses, combined with the current situation, made her feel more isolated and vulnerable than ever before. In a nearby room, Harrison was having his own crisis of faith. The hospital reminded him too much of home, of the people he had tried to save but failed. The horrors of war had taken a toll on his psyche, and he was beginning to doubt his ability to continue. Navarro, seeing his distress, approached him. "Doc, you need to pull it together. We need you." "I don't know if I can do this anymore," Harrison admitted, his voice trembling. "I thought I could help people, save lives. But all I do is patch people up so they can go back out and die." Navarro's expression softened. "I get it. This war. It changes you. But you have to hold on to something, anything to keep going. For me, it's getting back at the people who made me this way. For you, it could be saving as many lives as you can, even if it's just one more." Harrison looked at her, a spark of hope returning to his eyes. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I can still make a difference." Before they could continue, the hospital was suddenly under attack. A group of elite rebel soldiers had tracked them down, and the ensuing battle was brutal. The team fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. In the chaos, Myers was hit again, this time fatally. He collapsed to the ground, blood pouring from his wounds. Lawson rushed to his side, but it was too late. Myers, the man who had always been there to guide and support her, was gone. The loss was devastating. With Myers dead and the rebels closing in, the team was forced to retreat once again, their spirits broken. Despite the overwhelming sense of loss, Lawson knew they had to keep moving. They were close to the Loyalist outpost, and they couldn't afford to lose any more time. She rallied the remaining members of her team, determined to see the mission through to the end. Navarro, driven by a newfound resolve, proposed a risky plan. "We can draw the rebels away from the outpost. If we create enough chaos, they'll be too distracted to hold the line. It's a suicide mission, but it's our best shot." Lawson considered the plan carefully. It was dangerous, but Navarro was right, it was their only option. "Let's do it. We owe it to Myers to finish what we started." The team moved swiftly, setting explosives throughout the city and staging hit-and-run attacks on rebel positions. The plan worked. The rebels were thrown into disarray, abandoning their posts to deal with the sudden onslaught. With the path to the outpost clear, Lawson and her team made their final push. The outpost was just ahead, and they could see Loyalist soldiers engaging the remaining rebel forces. But as they neared the outpost, they were ambushed by a group of rebel soldiers. A fierce firefight ensued, with both sides taking heavy casualties. Harrison was hit, but he continued to fight, refusing to give up. In the midst of the battle, Lawson came face to face with the rebel commander, a man known as Victor, who had been orchestrating the attacks on the city. The two squared off, each determined to end the other. The fight was brutal, with both Lawson and Victor trading blows. But in the end, Lawson emerged victorious, delivering a final, fatal shot to Victor. With the rebel commander dead and the remaining rebels in retreat, The Loyalist forces secured the outpost. The battle for Solace was over, but the cost had been high. The aftermath of the battle was a somber affair. The Loyalist forces had won, but the victory felt hollow. The city of Solace was in ruins, and the loss of life on both sides was staggering. Lawson stood amidst the wreckage, reflecting on everything they had been through. They had survived against all odds, but at what cost? Myers was dead. Harrison was badly wounded, and the rest of the team was battered and bruised. As they prepared to leave the city, Lawson approached Harrison, who was being treated by a medic. "You did good, Doc, you saved us." Harrison looked up at her. His eyes filled with a mix of relief and sadness. "We lost a lot of good people." "We did," Lawson agreed, her voice heavy with emotion. "But we have to keep going. For them." Navarro, who had been standing nearby, nodded in agreement. "They gave everything so we could make it out. We can't let that be for nothing." As they boarded the transport that would take them away from Solace, Lawson couldn't help but think of Myers, of the people they had lost along the way. The war was far from over, and there would be more battles, more losses. But for now they had survived. And that was something. As the transport flew away from the city, Lawson looked out at the smoldering ruins below. The war had changed her, had changed all of them. They were no longer the same people who had entered Solace all those days ago. But despite the horrors they had faced, they had endured. They had fought with everything they had, and they had made it out alive. As the sun set on the horizon, Lawson made a silent vow to herself and to the memory of those they had lost. They would keep fighting, keep surviving until the war was won. And when that day came, they would remember Solace. Not just as a place of death and destruction, but as a testament to their resilience and determination. They had fought in the Warzone and had come out the other side. And they would never forget.
Thanks for watching Bit Tales. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more. Ring the bell to get notified whenever we post new tales. Your support helps us keep the stories coming.